The house is quiet now, the porch lights buzzing just a little. You hear that? And the day is finally winding down. The crickets are starting their evening choir practice out back. It's the best time of day, if you ask me. Come sit with me a minute, rest your legs, let the world spin without us for a bit. You know, I was looking for a screwdriver in the junk drawer earlier, and my hand brushed against an old box of kitchen matches. You know the kind, the big wooden ones with the red tips. I struck one just to see if it still worked. That smell, that sharp puff of sulfur, followed by the scent of burning wood. Lord, it hit me right here. Just that one smell, and suddenly I'm not sitting here anymore. I'm back in a high-rise apartment, looking out a window at a city that had simply disappeared. I'm talking about November 1965, the night the world stopped rushing, and we all had to just sit still in the dark. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were meatloaf nights, and nobody made a meatloaf dry enough to choke a horse quite like my landlady, Mrs. Gable. But that's a story for another time. November 9th, 1965. It was unseasonably warm for November, a gentle kind of autumn day. The kind where you didn't quite need a heavy coat yet, just a sweater. It was rush hour, about 5:15 in the evening. Now, you'll have to understand, folks. Back then, we didn't have cell phones glowing in our faces. We didn't have the internet. If you wanted news, you waited for the paperboy or you turned a dial on a box. I was finishing up some paperwork at the office. I was working downtown then and looking forward to getting home. The sun had just dipped down, and the city lights were starting to pop on, twinkling like they always did. The Great White Way, they called Broadway. It was always bright. And then something strange happened. The lights in the office didn't just go out, they dimmed, like someone was slowly turning down a dimmer switch on the whole world. They went orange, then a dull red, and then, snap, pitch black. At first, we all just sat there in the dark. You could hear chairs creaking. Someone laughed nervously. "Hey, who didn't pay the bill?" Old Jerry shouted from the back. We all chuckled. We thought it was a blown fuse in the building. But then I walked to the window. Lord, I'll never forget that sight. Usually, you look out at New York City at 5:30 p.m., and it's a sea of red taillights and glowing office windows. It's alive. But that night, it was like someone had thrown a heavy velvet blanket over the entire city. No street lights, no traffic signals, no glow from the skyscrapers, just nothing. Now, you have to remember the times we were living in. This was 1965. The Cold War wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was real life. We had drill sirens. We had duck and cover. So the first thing that went through everyone's mind, and I mean everyone, wasn't a power failure. We thought, this is it. The Russians are here. I remember walking down 12 flights of stairs, elevators were dead, of course, and seeing people huddled in the stairwells. But there was no panic. That's the funny thing. You'd think 30 million people plunging into darkness would cause a riot. But it didn't. When I got out to the street, it was the strangest sound I've ever heard. Silence. No subway rumble under the grate. The trains were stuck in the tunnels. No honking horns because the traffic was snarled so bad nobody could move an inch. But then the magic started. I saw a young fella, couldn't have been more than 20, standing in the middle of a busy intersection. He didn't have a uniform. He had a white handkerchief in his hand, and he was directing traffic like he'd been doing it his whole life. Whistling, waving cars through, just a regular citizen stepping up. And the shops? Lord help you, if you wanted to buy a candle that night, they were gone in 10 minutes. But the shopkeepers didn't close up and go home. They stayed. I passed a pizza place where they were cooking pies in the gas ovens, thank goodness for gas, and giving slices away because they couldn't ring up the register anyway. I finally made it back to my neighborhood after a long walk. It was about 9 p.m., and the craziest thing happened. The moon came out. And not just any moon, it was a full moon, a bright, brilliant silver dollar of a moon. Without the city lights to drown it out, it lit up the streets better than the electric company ever did. It was hauntingly beautiful. I remember seeing families sitting on their front stoops, not inside watching combat or the Red Skelton show like they usually would be. They were outside, talking, actually talking to each other. Can you imagine? I sat down with my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He had a little transistor radio. You remember those? The ones with the single earplug and the dial you had to turn just right to catch the signal. That radio was our lifeline. We listened to Dan Ingram on WABC. The radio stations had backup generators, you see. He was joking around, playing music, keeping everyone calm. He told us it wasn't the Russians. He said a relay switch up near Niagara Falls had tripped. Something about a power surge at the Sir Adam Beck station in Ontario. A tiny little switch, no bigger than a bread box, had knocked out power for 80,000 square miles, from Canada down to New Jersey. We felt so small listening to that, one switch, but we also felt together. There was an ice cream shop down the block, and the owner knew his freezers were warming up. So he came out with tubs of melting chocolate and vanilla. "Eat it before it's soup," he yelled. And we did. We stood there in the moonlight, eating melting ice cream with wooden spoons, laughing with people we'd lived next to for years but never really spoke to. It tasted like, well, that's what it tasted like. Somebody loved us. It tasted like community. People helped rescue folks stuck in elevators. They shared flashlights. They checked on the elderly. There was very little crime that night. It was like the darkness made us all gentle. We weren't rushing anywhere because there was nowhere to go. We were just being. Around 7 in the morning the next day, the lights flickered. I was asleep in my chair. They buzzed, dimmed, and then blazed back on. The refrigerator hummed to life with a shudder. The silence was broken, and I'll tell you the truth, I felt a little pang of disappointment. The magic spell was broken. We had to go back to being busy, back to the noise. But for those 12 hours under that full moon, we remembered what it was like to just be neighbors. All right, let's see if you were listening close or if you dozed off in the moonlight. Here's your brain prime for today. Question 1. I mentioned the exact date this happened, a warm day in November. What year was the Great Northeast Blackout? Question 2. It wasn't a bomb and it wasn't a storm. What specific piece of equipment up near Niagara Falls caused the whole mess? Question 3. We got lucky that night with the sky. What natural source of light made it possible for people to see the streets despite the blackout? If you got those right, you're as sharp as a tack today. And if you didn't, well, that just means you were enjoying the story too much to take notes. And I can't blame you for that. If this story brought a little warmth to your day, go ahead and click that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And share this with someone who remembers the good old days. Until next time, folks, keep your flashlights handy, check on your neighbors, and don't forget to look up at the moon once in a while. Pop Pop loves you. Bye now.